Welcome to the Back Porch, everyone. I'm Brandon Booth, your host of the Signpost Inn podcast, and I'm really happy today to have with me my regular co-host Matt Boland, and also my wife Liv today. So hello, guys.
Hey, Brandon. Hey, Liv.
Hey, Matt. It's fun to see your face.
Same.
We are all here together today to talk about Liv and I's new book. We're really excited because the book is finally available. I know on one of our previous episodes, in fact, it's the episode that's coming out today while we are recording. I said that the book is available. You can go to the store and buy it. But if you've been to the store since that episode, you've noticed likely that it's not quite yet ready, that it still says out of stock and books are coming. They are coming as of this recording. We have clicked the button and printed a whole bunch of copies, and all we're waiting on right now is for them to be delivered. And then we are going to send out several copies to supporters, and then we're going to put them on sale and you can buy the book. So hopefully, fingers crossed, by the time you listen to this episode, you will actually be able to purchase the book on our website, signpostin.org/store. That's the plan. I do want to say we've got some other stuff on the store now too, kind of slowly filling it out. It's really cool. You can get there's a retreat in your pocket digital guide that's for like $5, and it's worth way more than $5. Carry it on your phone and you can have anything from a 5-minute retreat all the way up to like a whole weekend, and it tells you how to do it all. It's really, really cool. So when you go to the website to buy the book that we're going to talk about today, just throw that in your cart. It's just $5 and it's free, or free download, not free download. It's a $5 download, but there is also a free download on there, which is our contemplative encounter with the Psalms, which you actually can throw in your cart totally for free and download. So when you hit the store, check that all out. signpostin.org/store. All right, that's my announcements. Let's do some updates from the back porch before we jump into the discussion of Liv and I's book. Matt, I'm going to throw it over to you first. What's up in your life, man?
I mean, so many things. It's been a wild summer, and I'm really thankful that school is starting up and everybody's just getting back into their routines, and I'm really glad for that. The funny thing that I have to share this morning is we got up early to work in the yard and get some stuff done. Since I work in the oil industry and there's a lot of industrial type materials that get used and then just lay around, I bring home a lot of things like spools, like big cable spools, wooden cable spools, and we use those in our backyard for tables. Holly likes to put plants on them. Anyway, we've had one for many years. It began to rot to the point where flower pots were drooping off the side, and we're like, we should really replace that. I brought a fresh spool home, and she, as we was getting ready for the podcast, right out this window, she was pulling the old one out. It's literally crumbling as she's pulling it out, and she finds the most random things inside of it. She's holding it to the window like, I found a baseball. We've never played baseball back here. Where did this come from? So yeah, the fun things that happen whenever you kind of start digging around and find really random stuff.
That is weird. Somebody hit a baseball over your fence and it landed in the middle.
I really think at one point we had found a baseball in the backyard and the kids ended up dropping something down that middle hole, right? Mm-hmm. And there's another one we have. It's full of like water bottles. I mean, because it just becomes a trash. Whenever you put kids around, said, this is where your picnic area is, kids. Here's the kids' table. They will drop everything into that middle hole and see if they can fill it up, right?
It's a time capsule.
It kind of has a time capsule, right? Just a stinky, rotty one.
The fact that kids will push everything into that center hole, it reminds me of that joke of how you know that the earth is not flat, because if it were flat, the cats would have pushed everything off the edge by now.
I love that. That's funny.
All right. That was my dad joke. Liv, what's going on in your life? Good to see you, by the way, on the podcast.
Thank you. Been a while. Yeah, a really long time. We have teenagers and people heading off to college and all this kind of stuff. Plus, it's been summer, so no homeschool as a daily concern. It's nice to actually get a second and take a Friday morning and be here, talk about grown-up things. Over the summer, as soon as school ended, I set myself the goal of turning our old wooden swing set, which, I'm trying to make myself feel better that I don't have small children anymore. It's kind of pathetic, but I'm like, we're going to find a use for that thing. We've turned it into a backyard shelter, and it's this sort of triangular wooden structure that's given us some good places for conversation. That was kind of my summer goal, and we accomplished it, and it is done. And thank you for your help, Brandon.
You're welcome. It looks really good too.
It's pretty
Like
cute.
everybody I've had back out there and sat down with has been like, wow, this is great. So yeah, it looks really good. I suppose we should make sure the listeners know if they're new to the show or don't know much about us. Liv and I are married. So Liv is my wife. And that's when I say good to have you back on the show. She's done a couple episodes, but they're way back in the archives. I will say, if you want to listen to some of Liv's shows on there's only a handful in the archives, but there was a Christmas one where I think you and I, Liv, led a Christmas meditation, or it was really good. So don't go listen to it now in September or whatever this is, but go wait till like December-ish and go find that one. It's actually really good. And then we've talked about a few other things in the past too, so you can go find those. My update is I'm really excited because our daughter came back, had been traveling. We had spent some time with my grandparents up in the Denver area, and Lee picked her up from my dad's house, mom and dad's house yesterday, and brought home a bunch of aspen poles from the mountains for me to turn into walking sticks. And I'm so excited because I was out of sticks, and these may need to be dried. I'm not sure, but they're really cool. And I love working with aspen, partly because it's such a like mountainy kind of thing to work with. And it's a really fun wood to work with. And I'm so like having fun making these pretty fancy at this point hiking sticks. It's bizarre that this is, I for a long time, I'm like, I need to have a good hobby. And why making hiking sticks has been something that I can enjoy doing on a relatively frequent basis, I don't know, but I really enjoy it. So yeah, there's several up at the lodge now. People are going to use them for prayer retreats. I think maybe I'll sell some of them in the future. They're really pretty cool though. But that reminded me of something I wanted to ask you, Matt, which is I know you are coming up for our staff retreat along with your lovely bride, Holly. And so again, listeners, if you don't know, Matt and Holly are on our board. So anyway, you're coming up. I was curious. I don't know. Does mesquite have any limbs that are like straight enough to make into sticks?
No, mesquite. Well, anything that's thin enough for a walking stick, they really tend to grow kind of gnarly.
Yeah.
And any ones that are of the size that would make a good stick are gonna have thorns. So no, I'm sorry. Mesquite trees in West Texas aren't really trees. They're shrub height bushes, and they are the dickens to get rid of. So the short answer is that you're literally barking up the wrong tree.
Yeah. I figured. I couldn't remember from having lived out there if I saw any that would I'm just going to put this bug in your ear. All right. If as you're out there, eh, making
Collecting
your
schools.
rounds, yeah.
Yep.
If you see, because look, here's the thing about the sticks that I'm making these days. They don't have to be the size of a walking stick. Like I prefer them to be about double the size or maybe even a little bit bigger because then I can carve them down. And so like if you see like a branch that's like, semi straight, even if it's this thick and you have a way of getting it up here, I'd love one.
Mission accepted.
All right, listeners, welcome to the back porch where we talk about whatever the heck comes to mind. Here's how this episode is going to go now that we're into the actual meat of it. We are going to talk about our books. Hopefully this will be a couple of episodes where we just lay out what's in the book and give you the highlights and encourage you to buy it because it's awesome. Matt is going to kind of interview Liv and I. That's how this is going to work. So I'm going to hand over the host role to you, Matt. It's all yours.
Thank you. And it's about time, I might say. So here we go. First of all, I think the thing that I have to comment on before I begin questions is just this idea of, holy cow, y'all finished a book. That's awesome. That's kind of crazy because I mean, ever since college, I've had this ambition of like, yeah, someday I'm going to write my thoughts down, or I've had like 3 different titles of young adult fiction that I've begun, and it's never happened. So way to go to have enough attention span to be able to sit down long enough to focus and type things out, much less a whole book. So well done, you guys.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Matt.
I have to say, first of all, as we were finally putting it together and we found out that it's like, I don't know, it's like 230 pages. I was like, wow, that's like a real book. Like that's an actual book. And
So,
it's not a
yeah, I have a question. When do you get to the point in life where you say, I'm a person that's allowed to write a book?
I don't know.
Right?
Well,
I'm a real grown up.
and he- and the big secret is we actually we went and counted. This book was actually written mostly by Liv. She's got like 22 chapters and I have like 9.
So it'll be a great break from our listeners to pick up because they hear you enough, right?
Amen.
Oh, something new and fresh, a new perspective from Sidepost In. Well, okay, so let's talk about the book. What is the book and what it's about? You held it up a second there, Brandon. Show us again. What's the book called?
So this is the proof copy, which is why it has the funny little thing there. But it's called Not Home Yet: How to Be Human in an Inhuman World.
Okay. And so why that title?
Yeah. I mean, so the book is very practical. I'll start by saying that, or maybe very real. Brandon and I have traveled all over the place with our last job, and we've lived in multiple places. The premise of the book is that Brandon and I are extremely different from each other. So it's hard to find one place where both of us have ever felt like, yes, I could be here forever. In fact, we really, in our relationship, probably even before we were married, we're talking about, I would want to live there. I wouldn't go there. I would go over there. And so we've had this feeling very practically, very personally, of never having been settled, never landing somewhere and saying, this is it, you know? So that's on on that practical level. And, it may also be because we have such close friends and family all over the place that there's not one place where there are our people either. And so that's the other feeling that, we all have, that there is no settled place. And, it's kind of speaking of when do I get to be a grown up? It's when am I home? When do I finally land? And when am I home? And we kind of get that restless feeling after we've lived somewhere for a while, and we start getting kind of antsy and thinking, oh, I don't know, this doesn't really feel like home. And so we wanted to address that feeling for people and to validate that feeling in case they felt like they were supposed to feel at home, or they were, as parents, are you supposed to create an atmosphere for your children where they feel settled, where we have home? And in our culture, especially, as Americans, we grow up and we move out. And so we feel displaced, but it's not just Americans, it's everybody. So the book Not Home Yet is about what does it mean to be human? What are those longings for connection that we have, both with God and with other people? And almost what is the reasonable level we can expect in this life? What does the Lord say about where we're from and where we're going and where we belong? And how do we create whatever spaces it is that the Lord invites us into for those people around us? How do we find our people? But also, how do we honor that feeling of no matter how many kindred spirits I have around me, no matter how much I love the view out my back window, I still will have that feeling that I'm not home yet. And that's the call of the Lord to connect with the people that he loves and with him. And then also to be looking forward to a real home, which is coming. We're not there yet.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I think everything that you just said there is definitely going to resonate with our listeners because in a certain sense, we've been talking about that idea, that sense and that feeling from day one, because I think that's the underlying condition of everybody, right? But I want to rewind it because that was great. But I want to go back. You mentioned briefly about living different places, and I was reading the first chapter, and right from the gate, you identify as Liv as a frog and Brandon's a hawk, and talk about that for a second because that was really clever.
So Brandon and I just celebrated a couple days ago our 22nd anniversary. Very exciting. One of the things that drew us together was Brandon sees the world so differently from me. And so we were married for, maybe 20 years before we sort of started putting words to it. We just stood back in fascination until that time. How are you seeing this world so differently from me? But after, many, many years, we sort of started doing that funny, game that you do about like, what would be your spirit animal? And what do you, how do you fit into the world comfortably? And so yeah, we looked at kind of what our different personalities are, and I resonate with being a frog. I love literally marshy places. I grew up in the Northeast, basically in a swamp. And so I love the filtered green light and I love the close spaces. And metaphorically, also, I love the up close. I love the particular. In the book, I mentioned holy specificities. And I love holy specificities, those little things in life that are poetic of the bigger things. And so I'll spend all of my time, literally, if you let me choose where I go on vacation, I'm going to find a pond and I'm just going to kind of go up to here and I'm just going to sort of, say have my nose sticking out of the water, but otherwise I'm just going to float. And that I value those close family relationships, the pond full of all my little froggy friends. And Brandon he's a hawk. He's a bird. He's got these big wide feathers and wings. And he, again, on that literal level, he wants to be, I don't know why, in these tall, dry, bright places on top of mountains. If there's a cliff, he's going to go climb it and stand there and spread out his wings. And he wants to see long distances and he wants the silence and the wind, in its feathers. And that's the literal side of it. But then figuratively, Brandon takes the long view. He likes to look out over the universals and the big ideas. And he spends a lot of time, even when he's talking to the Lord, he wants to be alone. And not that he's a loner, but that he kind of finds his peace more with that. You need to describe yourself,
There
Brandon.
needs to
This
be
is why I
space.
don't fully,
Yeah.
I don't get
Yeah,
it.
yeah,
I don't
yeah,
get
yeah,
it.
yeah.
But we embrace it. We the French, right? Vive la différence. There's a difference between us and hooray. Yeah, but looking at it as two perspectives on the world and recognizing that they both are needed, but how exciting it is that we get to have it within one relationship. But Brandon, you should describe yourself.
Well, okay. So for the book, the interesting part is whether you're a hawk or a frog or something else, we both want to know that we're okay and that we belong.
Yeah.
Like we both want to know that, whatever your personality is or whatever spirit animal you identify with, whatever, but whatever it is that you are, we want to know that it's okay to be that. And we want to know that we have a place that we're accepted and loved for that. And so for Liv and I, it's been really interesting to discover that we can be a place for the other kind of thing. Like a frog can actually accept a hawk and a hawk can actually accept a frog and not hate or dislike or, the differences can be good. But it's also true, like in the book, a kind of constant theme that runs throughout it is this idea of making an oasis and finding your froggy friends. Because in our relationship, Liv has always kind of been the one that's had to be out of place. Like we live in Colorado. I've moved around a lot and she's faithfully followed and been good about that, but always been dragged to a place where frogs don't really thrive. So a frog in a desert is a really hard thing to do. And we've been in many deserts. And so literal deserts. And so she has always been searching for her froggy friends. And so that idea that we are looking for people to, creating a pond in the desert and then having other people join us. Partly that's just a fun little thing throughout the book. Like, which perspective you're getting something from because, either I'm writing it or Liv's writing it. We put a little frog next to it or a little hawk next to it. And that's kind of fun.
Okay. And on that, I've got a comment on that because I've read many books that have had multiple authors and none of them, you never know exactly who's talking. So the fact that each chapter begins with that little icon and your name on it and who's speaking is awesome. So I already love that feature of the book because so many times you're like, well, I don't know who's talking here. And that they're not, that no two authors are 100% right. Their words aren't interchangeable. So I love the fact that I'm like, oh, I'm listening to Liv now. I'm listening to Brandon now. That's genius.
And that was done on purpose because it makes the book a bit of a dialogue as well. I will also, here's inside information for anybody who listens to the podcast and also reads the book. It's not in the book anywhere. We don't say this. This is just kind of behind the scenes fun. But now you'll know many, many, many of the chapters I'll write from the 30,000 foot view. And then Liv will take that same idea and write it from the close up view. But what's super fun is if you're reading through one of the chapters I wrote and you're like, oh my gosh, this is too philosophical, I don't get it. This guy does not resonate with me. You can basically just skip to the next chapter that Liv wrote and get the same idea from like this much closer. It's really pretty cool. So anyway, if you're Or if Liv is like, can you just get to the point? Stop painting beautiful pictures and tell me your point. You can skip her chapter and get to my chapter and actually find out what the point is. No. Anyway, it's really cool.
Then you can call in and say which of us you like better.
Oh no, don't do
Online
that.
poll
No.
forthcoming. No,
No.
Don't do that. Don't do that.
We
We're a
already
team.
know who's gonna win. I already know that Liv's gonna win, and I don't want to play this game. Well, I'm going to use that as a segue to answer the other question, because I want to read a little bit from the book. The question of, what is this book about? Why is it called Not Home Yet? And the frog and the hawk is the fun way we get into, we all feel alone. But this is from the very beginning of the book. This is in the first chapter. This is written from my perspective. Dear reader, I don't know you, but there is one thing I know about you. Your life is hard. You've suffered and are suffering. You have loved and lost. You have suffered sickness and financial distress. You have been hurt, and you have hurt others. You are tired, and above all, you are lonely. I know this because you're human, and you live in a world that doesn't feel like a home for humans. Like frogs living in a desert, we all suffer from constant thirst. I instinctively feel there must be something more to life. More joy, more safety, more significance, more friends, more help. But those things are hard to find in a desert. I feel I should be living in a place of abundance, a place with water everywhere. But I live in a land of scarcity. My throat is always parched, my skin dry and leathery. Do you feel the same? Some of us have tried to adapt. We've tried to find comfort or solace in dirty pleasures of this wasteland, pretending to be lizards with hard protective scales. Some of us have tried to ignore reality. We pretend that puddles are as good as lakes, or we look for ways to distract ourselves from what's really going on. Others have just given up hope. We all feel alone. Where are my froggy friends, my brothers and sisters who love to swim and play? Why is it so hard to connect? Why do I always feel like I'm the one who doesn't get it, or I'm the one that no one really gets? Let me speak plainly for a moment. We humans were born in a garden, a place of abundance and life. We were meant to live in a garden city, a place with good work to do and good friends to do it with. Our deepest instincts tell us this is true, but that's not this world, at least not yet. We are all travelers in this wilderness, sojourners in a strange land, or in the words of the Apostle Peter, exiles dispersed abroad. At the same time, we are also chosen according to the foreknowledge of God, the Father, through the sanctifying work of the Spirit, to be obedient, to be sprinkled with the blood of Jesus Christ. So we are wanderers, but not lost, exiles, but not without a promised land, lost children, but not orphans, pilots who've crashed behind enemy lines, but the Marines are on the way. We are homeless, but not truly without a home. We're just not home yet.
Mhm.
And I think that little portion really captures the idea. We know you're hurting. Even when we laugh, there's pain underneath it. And here's what this book really is. It's an offering to all people who feel it. And we want to say two things. We want to say, there is a way to survive in this world. There is a way to thrive even. And that begins with getting to know God as he really is. And then two, the way we most often first get to know the way God really is through other human beings showing us his love. And so we also want to help you create oases and introduce other people to that love so that through you, people can see the real love of God. And we believe that that's what creates community and oasis in this world. This book is not telling you how to bring home to this earth. This book is telling us how we can, as the body of Christ, show hospitality and love to each other and kind of limp all of us together into our real home.
Mhm. Mhm. Well, and everything you described there, I'm kind of almost transported back to our first couple of podcasts because we did talk about the idea of what signposts in ministries, like that, the metaphor of the inn at the crossroads. And everything you just said there is exactly what we talked about then, is this idea of being on a journey, but still having this sense of, I feel like, even though I've been on the journey for a long time, I still feel like it's so far away. And
Mhm,
I need a respite. I need a place to stop and refresh because
mhm,
there's still a long way to go.
mhm.
Leave.
Something I we do mention it in the book, don't we? There were so many
Yes,
bits
we
and
do.
pieces. Yeah, so many bits and pieces that we explored and so many extra things that we've set aside maybe for a later project, but, um, exactly that pausing place, and I believe we talked about it, a long time ago, but that idea of in Narnia where the children stop at the beaver's dam, they're lost in the snow and they're being led by this little bird, and then they're lost and they don't know what's going on. And then they land at the beaver's dam. And so that moment was instrumental to creating Signposted in the first place. And we knew that idea of the light in the window, you need a second to rest your body and soul and connect with other people. And so we knew that was there. But then the necessity of when you're sitting with believers who are reflecting the love and acceptance of God, intentionally welcoming you in the name of Christ, we then regain a sense of purpose and vision of what the bigger picture is. And so when they're at the Beaver's Dam, we love the specifics, those holy specificities of, the potatoes steaming and all those things. But then, of course, the point of the conversation after their bodies are comfortable, their minds have settled, they're warm, then they talk about Aslan coming back. And that is the part that brings that, Susan feels it like fresh air, with his name and that renewing of purpose and renewing of context and giving them a hope and a picture of the future that they didn't even know that they needed. But that hospitality moment, those moments of pause that Signpost Inn was created for in the first place are not only moments of human connection, but that we meet God in those people and that gives us a much bigger sense of purpose that life is worth living, actually. Because I don't know if you're like me, you get moments where you go, why are we still doing this?
Mhm.
This is hard. There's beautiful
Yeah.
moments, but it's hard. So, yeah.
I think the book also, like, just to develop on that, the book represents a development of the mission because or a further unpacking in our own minds of what the mission is of Signpost Inn, because that metaphor, right? You can whether it's an oasis or the beaver's dam or the inn at the crossroads. The wanderers, sojourners, the journeyers find a place on the journey to stop and connect with other human beings, other frogs, other I mean, you get to connect with people who accept you and who are there to support you. And then there's a signpost. And that's the idea that we meet God and other people, that we are pointed towards home by fellowship and love, conversation, good bread. These things, the holy specificities, one of the beauties of them is that they, without words, are reminders that there is a home. When you're really tired and it's been a long day and you walk in and there's fresh bread being baked and you're hungry and you sit down, and I don't know if you've ever had this moment, but I have it frequently at my house with my wife who cooks delicious food. You sit down and you just, like, for a moment, everything goes away because you're like, all I want is that bread. And I'm just going to stuff it in my mouth. And it's so delicious because you're so hungry. But that is a wordless reminder that there is a coming of the king when my hunger is finally satisfied.
Mm.
And then you get full and everybody starts talking and they're laughing. You got a glass of wine and everybody's kind of chuckling. And we're having a great time. And that's the word full reminder that there's a feast that's not going to end. There's a home when we're all going to be together and we're all going to be full. We're all going to be happy. We're all going to be talking. And I'm not going to have that sneaking suspicion somewhere behind this that either one, I'm a frog out of water or a hawk out of place, or, this is going to come to an end and they're not going to like me. That's not going to happen.
Mm.
And I'm not going to have to leave. And so what we're recognizing in the book is, one, we're not there yet.
Mhm.
But these moments remind us that there is a coming. There is a time when it won't be like that. here's the big question of the book, and we even say it. Okay, so now what? In the meantime, now what?
Mm.
Yes, we're not home. Yes, there's a homecoming. All right. How do we live in the between time? And that's what the book is actually about. How to be human, how to live in this between time in this inhuman world.
Mm. Yeah, metaphors work on me really well, right? And believe you went straight into my heart whenever you bring up a scene from the Chronicles of Narnia. That speaks to my soul, right? It's actually perfect because Lewis captures it. Here's a world, always winter, never Christmas. And that's not the way it's supposed to be. We know that the way the world is supposed to be is there's winter gives way to spring, and with spring comes all the things of the joys, and there's this natural rhythm and cycle. The evil of the witch is that she's frozen it into this desolate, even though there's beauty there, right? Because all even in winter there's beauty, but she's taken all the beauty out of it and all the joy out of it. And that's basically like and I think that's what y'all mean whenever you talk about being human in an inhuman world, right? Unpack the inhumanness that we're living in a little bit.
I'm going to jump in real quick and then turn it over to you, Levi. I think that's the crucial non-metaphorical part of the book, this thing that I can bring to the table, which is it's really important to understand that we as humans, what it means to be human is to be in that place. Like we have a purpose, we have a nature, a way that we're supposed to be. We are supposed to be living in harmony with each other. We are supposed to be living with all of our actions directed towards serving others and loving God, right? I mean, it's very, from a Christian perspective, very simple. There are two great commands: love the Lord your God with all your heart, mind, strength, soul, and love your neighbor as yourself. And from a theological, philosophical perspective, those aren't requirements, those are descriptions of what God made. He made beings that would love him and love each other. We broke it by sin. We continue to break that by our sin. Sin is the fact that we don't live that way. And so what it means to be human is to be the kind of thing that others and God are always the forefront of our mind. But we live in a world where that's just not the case. It's not true about me. I'm forefront of my mind all the time. And it's just, so that's the twistedness of sin. And that's the reality we find ourselves in. I start the second chapter by saying I've set myself a difficult task. I'm going to try to convince you that the Christian doctrine of original sin is good news. And I'm not going to go into that right now. I'm just going to let y'all read the chapter because it's exceedingly good news to find out, oh yeah, the sense that I have that everything's broken and wrong, well, that's because it is. And that means there's an answer to it too. But like, you're not like stuck trying to pretend like somehow the world's okay. It's not. It's inhospitable to us. And it feels terrible here. There is hope. There is a way to live in it. And there is a conclusion to it. But I like to start with just telling you, hey, you feel like crud about the world? Yeah, well, you're feeling the right way about things. Things are not the way they're supposed to be.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, and I really think, because we're probably going to have to talk about that a little bit more in the next episode, but there is a sense that it is good news that we're not reading the world wrong, because there is this kind of gaslighting that goes on that's like, no, though there's nothing wrong with the world, you're the problem, right? You're expecting too much from life. You should just accept, basically it's the slave master saying, you should accept your slavery. This is the best it gets. There's no real world out there, just like in the silver chair, Lee, right? It's like the only real world is the underground darkness, and there is no Narnia, right? So go ahead, jump in, Lee.
Yeah, well, you read my mind, of course. Yes, that exactly. Oh, the sun. No, actually, I think you mean it's this green lamp. And so you imagined a sun, Yeah, the world tells us all kinds of things that are not even worth mentioning, because the question is, what is it like to be human? What is it like to be human? It's not like this. There's something wrong here. So what is it like to be human? So what Signposting gets to do through all of the resources that we offer, which include the podcast, but even the book, Spiritual Direction, our email, all of these things are reminding us, what is it like to be human? Well, let's look at the best one. What's the best human? Well, that's Jesus. What's he like? What's he actually like? Not what do I come with my fears, my real spiritual abuse, my background of whatever, but who is he actually? And so we do spend a lot of time in spiritual direction. The whole point is directing our attention toward who really is the Lord. And so for me, with all these specificities, that's going to be a million things. But for the purposes of the book, one of my favorite things the Lord ever did to show what a human being is that after he rose from the dead, his disciples are disheartened and sad, and they go out back to their nets and they go fishing and they don't catch anything. And then on the shore, the Lord, who they don't know who he is, and he calls out, "What have you caught, boys?" And they go, nothing. And he goes, "Well, try that side." He pulls it out. There's all the fish. They go, "It's the Lord." Obviously, look, there's the Lord. And when they come ashore, this is my favorite thing. He hasn't set up an altar, like standing there floating and glowing. He's got a charcoal fire and he's cooking fish.
Mhm.
And this is how he shows us what a human being is.
The-
Cooking, he's cooking fish. And, that's his first thing that they see that makes them recognize him. Or on the road to Emmaus, he breaks the bread
Pa-
and they're like, "Oh, him." Look at that.
Yeah. Pause there for a second because that's okay. Jesus is cooking fish on the beach for his disciples, who, by the way, they just caught a bunch of fish. So he already had them, but that's okay. Neither here nor there, other than just that's fun. But
Hmm.
you said leave. That's how he shows what a human is. But what's genius is that's also how he shows who God is,
Yeah.
right? Like
Hmm.
they recognize the Lord because Jesus, the man, is sitting on the beach with breakfast already prepared for them, not waiting for them to bring the fish in. As you said, not waiting for their worship, not waiting for their, whatever. He's already got it. He's already everything that's needed. It's already there. It's already warm. It's already cooked. They can come off the boat and immediately start eating. And the phrase, "Oh, that's the Lord." That is okay, this is what we're trying to capture in this book, and there's many chapters on who is God really. That's one of the titles, but there's many chapters on this. This is not a theological answer. And this is not a theological book of, "Let me tell you the attributes of God." No, 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 no. What we're after in all of this is that it's that kind of recognition you have about a person when you see their real character. Oh, yeah. Well, I know that's God because, man, he's already got the breakfast ready. That's the way he works.
Hmm.
Who is God really? We want you to recognize Jesus and God, not abstractly, but in the same way that grandma's cooking. You're like, "Oh, yeah, that's grandma's. What is it she makes that you love? Oh, yeah, that's my mom's cookies." That's like, you just know them because the joke about what's the secret ingredient is love. Well, it's not really a joke, right? Because that is actually the secret ingredient to the really good stuff.
Hmm.
And that's when the sheep know the voice of the Lord. It's not that they know the tenor of it. It's not that they know what he sounds like.
It's not that
It's
they've
that they know
memorized all the Bible verses.
the tone of gentleness and love in it. That's what they recognize.
Hmm.
And that's what we're going after. So, yes, it's Narnia all over the place. I do have to just briefly say, for those of listeners who are not fans or knowledgeable about Narnia, it's okay. You have a friend on this podcast. I am not a fan of Narnia either. I love Narnia sort of, but I've never it just never really rang with me. So it's okay if
It's
you're
for
not a huge nerd.
frogs. Narnia's for
I
frogs. I'm
think
just
it
gonna
is. I
say.
think it is.
Yeah.
But whether you're a hawk or a frog, whether you like Narnia or not, you can know Jesus that way. You can know God because you can hear the love in his voice for you, and then you recognize him. You recognize him everywhere then.
If you've grown up in church, you've heard the story of Jesus on the beach, right? Nobody's ever pointed out to me that Jesus preparing breakfast for his disciples is an act of hospitality and kindness towards them, right? And I guess I'm kind of blown away. I'm just wrapping my mind around this, because if I was the Son of God and rose from the dead, my first stop wouldn't be to act hospitably to those I love. I'd be showing up to Pilate, be like, "What do you like? What do you think of me now? What's up?" That's what I would do. But Jesus goes and ministers to exhausted, weary disciples.
His boys.
Yeah, that blows me away.
Well, and that's the okay, that's the theological truth here, right? And once you've seen that connection in that story, you start to see it in all the other stories. What else would the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, who became Jesus, do? This is how you recognize him, because he doesn't show up in front of Pilate and be like, "Look at me now." We would recognize that guy as Satan, right? We would know him as being the one who wants to show off, the one who wants to dominate, the one who wants power to control and be mean. But we recognize, and this is what Jesus says all throughout the New Testament. This is why he has such harsh words for the Pharisees who don't recognize the heart of the God of Abraham. They don't recognize that the first thing the true God thinks to do is make a warm, hospitable place for his children. It's the most natural thing in the world for the God-man in glory to multiply the fish, to make a fire, to welcome people into a cozy place. Just like it was the most natural thing in the world for the God-man at the beginning of his ministry to make a bunch of wine at a wedding, right? Just like it was the most natural thing in the world for the God who created out of nothing to make a garden, which is super comfortable and wonderful for his children.
And there's more we could even go on this, which probably we need to save for another episode. But creation itself, the sixth day you've got man, and the next day is not a work day. Humans are created.
The first thing, yeah.
They're on earth. They're ready to go. And now we rest.
Yep.
Yeah, that's who he is. And then by extension, once we know that, we know him, we watch him, we say, yeah, that's who he is. Then we see him in other parts of scripture being him, which helps us interpret the rest of it rather differently. Yeah, Brandon.
I just want to point out that now we rest on the seventh day is not now we stop and all dryly do nothing and sit at a long, boring lecture. No. Rest in the biblical sense is party, right? It's feast. It's enjoy the fruits of the labor. It's you work for 6 days so that you can enjoy the fruits of those labors on the seventh day, where you're eating and drinking and joy and partying and having good time and conversation and dancing. I mean, it's rest, but it's not do nothing and sit quietly. I mean, it may include that if you want it, if you need it. But so the seventh day Sabbath rest that we are going to enter into at the end of all time is not a lonely floating on a cloud playing a harp and observing the abstractness of beauty. No, it's a feast, a laden table with all your best friends and Jesus himself cracking the best jokes.
Wow. I never even realized that either, Leaf. Mankind's first new day dawning is a Sabbath day. Wow. Never realized that, never thought of it. Yeah, a Sabbath day in a garden in the presence of God.
That's what he's made for.
Let's pause here. I think we can do another episode, hopefully the next one, kind of picking up on some of these themes. Listeners, I would like to kind of conclude this one by saying the book itself is very practical. We have been talking about this setup, and there is this theoretical schema you have to kind of get before you can understand the practicalities. But this is not a theological treatise. This is actually a very practical guide to making a lot of what we're talking about right now more concrete.
There's literally a bread recipe in it.
Yeah. And what I would mark this episode as sort of a whet your appetite. If you have felt some part of your heart stir and you're saying, dang, I want to know God's voice that way.
Mm-hmm.
Or you're even resisting it. You're saying, I'll tell you what, that sounds scary because I'm not sure that I ever heard God that way, and I'm not sure I can. Or you're saying, the God that I've been introduced to in most of my life is not like that. He's much more distant. He's much more angry. He's much more demanding. And I'm not sure I even want to try to see him differently. If those are any of your responses or others, I just want to tell you this book is for you. That, like, we are writing to you, that we had you in mind. And we want to take you to a place, or at least invite you into a place, where the way you feel when you hear God talked about is loved, accepted, as if it's a homey, wonderful Christmas place. It's that Christmas morning feeling. That's where we're going to go next. If you're following the book, we're going to take you into that place as best we can, invite you into that place. And that's really practical. We don't talk theory there. We actually talk really practicalities of how you can begin to experience that. And then the last half of the book says, if you're in that place, if you've got some of that, okay, now really practical, how can you offer it to others? So listeners, if you are interested, if this has piqued your interest, signpostin.org/store to pick up your copy of the book. Throw a couple of those other resources in. We'd love to have that. And then reach out. Let us know what you think. We would love to hear your thoughts. You can send us an email at podcast@signpostin.org. Do not send an email telling us which author you like better. This is not going to happen. This is not a competition. Hawks are better. We know that. So we're not going to even try.
I was just going to say it's not a competition because it's not a competition. So, you know.
That's an inside joke between Liv and I. And also, I would like to, listeners, if you haven't yet signed up for our email, we send a weekly email out that does the same thing. So weekly, you can get stuff like this in your inbox. You can be reminded of who God really is and touch base with that. So again, signpostin.org. There's a menu called free stuff, and just find one of the ones. There's a free download, a free book, and that signs you up for the email. We'd love to have you there too. I think that's about it. Is there anything else, Matt, Liv, you'd like to leave listeners with?
I was just going to say there's just so much more to talk about. Matt, I love getting your perspective on things, and it helps us to talk a little bit more about what we love to talk about. So thanks for being here today and facilitating this conversation. It's been great.
Right. Well, I'm excited for next time.
Yeah.
So let's meet back here, come back, and we'll go again.
Sounds great.
Next time. Yeah.
Yeah. Listeners, thanks for being with us. May the grace of Christ go with you wherever the road takes you.
Amen.
Thanks for listening. This podcast is a production of Signpost Inn Ministries, a nonprofit Christian ministry dedicated to strengthening people's relationship with Jesus and walking with them compassionately on their life's journey. We offer spiritual direction, retreats, and lots of other resources like this podcast. Please visit us at signpostin.org to learn more. We especially want to thank our generous donors who support our work and keep this podcast going. If you've benefited from something you've heard, please consider supporting us by making a tax-deductible gift at signpostin.org/donate. We also want to thank Rex Daugherty for creating the original theme music for this podcast. You can check out more of his work at his website, and you can find all the links in our show notes.